السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I'd like to welcome you to the annual Islamophobia Studies Center fundraising dinner. And as usual, we always insist on beginning with dinner, following the prophetic hadith, أطعموا الطعام وأفشوا السلام وقوموا للصلاة والناس نيام. Meaning feed people, spread salutation, and then if you want to be dedicated to prayer, get up late at night and pray. So alhamdulillah, we did the first, which is we ate, and now we're spreading salutation, and hopefully we'll begin our program. I want first to recognize that this community has really suffered a large number of losses in Gaza. And I want to particularly speak of Mazen in here and the Hijazi family, and also Al-Qarra family. Both are dear members of our community, and I know the family from almost 30 years. I think the Hijazi family, as far as what I told when I talked to our dear brother Kamal Hijazi before he traveled, he said about 105 members of the family and their relatives that have been lost in Gaza. And Al-Qarra family as well, Bazian said like 45 members, 47 members that have died. As well, the Harara family, when Hamza Harara asked me to come and do the khutbah last time, he texted me the day before that 17 members of their family have been killed just the day before I came to give the khutbah. And I know that Ala al-Bakri and Salah al-Bakri, the Bakri family as well, is here, and Ala is going to speak later on just to speak about his family. So when we talk about Palestine and its impact and the impact of demonization, we are literally experiencing it here. And I said when we were up in Sacramento, if you told the American public that 10,000 dogs or cats have been killed, the whole country would have shut down. But now we have close to 30,000 with 11,000 kids, babies, children, and literally almost total silence. And we're continuing to send bombs, ammunition, and opposing the World Court investigation from South Africa on genocide. Now, Islamophobia is definitely is connected because you have to demonize a people in order for you to actually see their murder, their mayhem, their killing, their destruction as something almost acceptable or natural or normal. Palestinians have been called, I don't like to repeat it, but animals, children of darkness, barbaric, all these attributes, which we thought belonged to the 18th century, were back with us in force. So today we're going to have some discussions that will look and intertwine how Islamophobia works relative to Palestine. And our first speaker is a dear colleague, a friend from UC Berkeley. I say we are blessed that we have been able to bring him to UC Berkeley from Rice University in Houston. This is his second year with us. He's the Chancellor Chair and Professor of History, University of California, Berkeley. Professor Makdisi's most recent book, Age of Coexistence, The Ecumenical Frame and the Making of the Modern Arab World, was published in 2019 by the University of California Press. He's also the author of Faith Misplaced, The Broken Promise of U.S.-Arab Relations, 1820 to 2001. His previous book includes Artillery of Heaven, American Missionaries and the Failed Conversion of the Middle East. This is actually one of really a very, very important book for anyone that deals with the Middle East. It was published by Cornell University, which was the winner of the 2008 Albert Hourani Book Award from the Middle East Studies Association. The 2009 John Hope Franklin Prize of the American Studies Association, and co-winner of the 2009 British Kuwait Friendship Society Book Prize, given by the British Society for Middle Eastern Studies. Now, if you have not followed Professor Ussama Makdisi on X or previous Twitter, please do so. You are on social media. Make sure to actually follow him and also tweet the statements that he puts out because we're dealing with so much nonsense on the outside. It's very important for us to amplify sound voices that actually study the Middle East and can actually point it out on a map rather than somebody still think the Middle East is somewhere in Mars or some other places. So it's a pleasure to welcome Ussama Makdisi, his first visit to us in here on MCA. So welcome to the community.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Bazian. Assalamu alaikum. As I told Hatem earlier, I'm recovering from an illness. Don't worry, I won't infect anyone. But I want to congratulate Hatem and the NCA and everyone here for the work on building up this center, and of course the really important work that Hatem as a leader of the community has been doing in terms of the Islamophobia Studies Center. So thank you, Hatem, and thank you to everyone here for all the work that you're doing. Because of course we all need to combat anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, and anti-human racism more than ever before. Especially that we are 100 days into the war on Palestine, the war on Palestinian children. What more can I possibly tell you that you don't already know? And I share with Hatem the sense of mourning, the sense of just the impossibility of words in the face of the inferno of hatred and genocide taking place in Gaza and honestly across Palestine. So, can you hear me in the back? Yeah, you can hear me? Okay. We've all seen, we've all witnessed, we've all felt the extraordinary combination of what Hatem referred to, racism, Islamophobia, Orientalism, in a way that Western liberal states, Britain, France, virtually all the European Western states, Germany, as well as many, many different universities, cultural centers, major figures, let alone politicians and the mainstream media, have all lined up in support of Israel, despite the fact that we are now 100 days into the slaughter of people in Gaza. We have all seen in the past few days how the United States, Canada, Germany, and the UK have publicly and shamelessly and shamefully stood with Israel in the International Court of Justice to defy the South African case that's been brought against Israel at the International Court of Justice, the UN, in other words, World Court at The Hague, for, of course, the horrors that Israel has inflicted on Gaza and on the Palestinian people for the past 100 days. So that is the obvious one. In other words, all of us here, I think, know this, we all feel this, we all see this in very different ways. And that's, it's not something I really need to comment on very much because you all know it. At the same time, I think what is positive, insofar as there's any positive glimmers of positivity in this moment, is the fact that throughout the world, and many of you have seen this on social media, and you've seen this, I hope, in your communities and among your friends, there are millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world. In fact, I would say billions of people around the world, but certainly hundreds of millions of people around the world from every race, every religion, from every ethnicity, who have stood up for justice in Palestine. In other words, now more than ever before, there is a titanic struggle taking place around the world. The fact that South Africa was able to bring and was willing to bring the case of genocide to the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, tells us that there is this global struggle taking place. The fact that the South African, I don't know how many here saw the ICJ case, how many saw the first, the opening, and many of you did. Good. You saw, of course, I hope you noticed the South African legal team that presented the case against Israel. Do you notice something? Black and white. Muslim, Christian, and I think Jewish South African lawyers, young and old, working together in the face of monumental Western racism, in the face of monumental Western racism, tells us, in fact, that we are at a historic turning point. And not just South Africa, Malaysia, Turkey, Namibia. Alas, not too many Arab states. I wish there were more Arab states. But at least Malaysia, Namibia, Turkey, Bangladesh, and several other states have stood with South Africa in bringing this case to the international court, to the world court. As Gaza burns under one of the most intense bombardments of modern history, on, of course, one of the most densely populated areas and spaces in the world. And as Israel has, as everyone here knows, cut off food, electricity, water, to punish a besieged population of 2.2 million. All of you know, of course, that half the population of Gaza is our children. And all of you know that they've been crammed and besieged in this place for decades and decades. Yet, as the West supports the genocide, or at least turns a blind eye to the genocide that is taking place in Gaza, the rest of the world is standing up for justice. And so, insofar as there's a message to be taken, it's the fact that the world is divided right now more clearly than ever before into two separate camps, two rival camps. On the one side, there are those like South Africa, like everyone in this room, like people that I know and love and cherish, who stand up for justice, who stand against Orientalism, who stand against Islamophobia, who stand against racism. And then, of course, there are those who apologize for racism, apologize for Islamophobia, apologize for injustice, and apologize for genocide. On the one side, there is what the brilliant historian Islamophobia refers to as global Palestine. In other words, all around the world, there are peoples of all faiths and backgrounds who support Palestinian justice before October 7th, and even more so all the way to today, all around the world. And on the other hand, as Islamophobia also points out, there are people who support what he refers to as global Israel. In other words, there are Christian Zionists. There are, unfortunately, some states in the Middle East that support Israel. There are people, of course, across the West who support Israel. And so there's this global titanic struggle taking place between those who believe that justice is universal, us, and those who believe that justice should be limited to only some people in some parts of the world. There are those who believe that Palestinian and Muslim life is worthy and meaningful to be cherished, and those who do not. And so that's the situation we're in. So the question I have, and I struggle with, and I struggle with Hatem on this question, is how do you explain why every major Western state, every major Western leader remains until this very moment, 100 days into a genocide that's being live streamed in front of everyone's computer, everyone's tablet, everyone's phone? How can so many Western leaders, until this very moment, oppose a ceasefire? It's not even a call for justice. It's a more basic thing to call for, anyone can call for. How do we make sense of the fact that across the liberal West, to say nothing of within Israel itself, there is in the 21st century extraordinary dehumanization of an entire people tied to their decontextualization? Why is it that when given a chance, repeatedly, to condemn genocide and to call for a ceasefire, so many people, leaders in the West, refuse to do so? Why? Why does Bernie Sanders, who was on the left or the liberal side, why did Bernie Sanders, who called for justice a few years ago, why is he unwilling until today to call for a ceasefire in Palestine? Why does Joe Biden, who in a church in South Carolina to condemn white supremacy, cannot come to call for a ceasefire? And not just that, he openly enables the genocide of the Palestinians by saying, for example, that Palestinian casualty counts are vastly exaggerated. So why? Why this hypocrisy? Why this racism? Why this Orientalism? Why this Islamophobia? So the obvious answer is because there is. Everyone here has experienced at one level or another. But there's a more, I think, a more difficult answer that we have to grapple with. And if I leave you with one idea, it's this. The fact that you have Israeli politicians and Israeli journalists and American journalists and American politicians, especially on the right, but also in the Democratic Party, who who openly call for the destruction of Gaza, who openly dehumanize Palestinians, who openly sort of resort to the most vulgar and awful language to describe what's happening to the Palestinians, who call for the obliteration of Palestinians in Gaza, who constantly conflate Hamas with all of the Palestinians, and who, of course, know nothing about Palestinian history or humanity. Why is it that this is all taking place, and how can this all take place in the 21st century? It's not just racism, it's not just Orientalism, it's not just Islamophobia. It's something else. It goes back to this way that people in the West, if you think about this, you grapple with this, it's the way people in the West think about Israel. So the way they think about Israel is in two ways. One is they don't think about Palestine. There's a complete denial of Palestinian history, a total refusal to understand the beauty and complexity and the pluralism that was in Palestine before 1948. In other words, Palestine belonged to an extraordinarily rich part of the world, rich as in rich in culture, rich in faith, rich in Islam, rich in Eastern Christianity, rich in Eastern Judaism, rich in all sorts of ways. Palestine was a profoundly rich, multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious place. Just like the rest of the Masjid, the rest of the Arabians. It was a place that people had coexistence. It's a place where Muslims and Christians and Jews live together. And it's a place that has this extraordinary history that's been completely erased and denied. So that's the first part of the story, is the refusal to understand and see and think about this history of coexistence, which all of you should know about, and all of you should be proud about, because it is a profound history, and it's a beautiful part of the history of Palestine. It's really one of the most important things. So that's the first part, this complete ignorance, this refusal to see, this refusal to understand that the people of Palestine have an extraordinary history, an extraordinarily rich history, just like all the other peoples of the nation. That's the first point. The second point is that when they think about Palestine and Israel, as I said, they don't think of the Palestinians. What they do think of is something else. They think of the Holocaust. And so when they think of the Holocaust, they think of the Holocaust as something that was terrible, that was done. Which of course it was. The Holocaust was terrible. That was done to the Jews of Europe. And then they think of Israel as simply the recompense or the atonement for the Holocaust. So in other words, in the way the Western sort of liberals and others of Israel and Palestine, on the one hand, there's complete denial of the Palestinians. On the other hand, there's a story they tell that there was a history of anti-Semitism, which is true, although they always forget the fact that anti-Semitism was Western. It wasn't in Palestine, it wasn't in the Middle East. It was almost entirely in the West. In other words, the persecution of Jews, the racism of Jews in the West. So you ignore the history of Palestine, you don't talk about Palestinians, you don't talk about coexistence, you ignore this history, the reality on the ground of Palestine, and on the other hand, you tell a different story, a story of anti-Semitism in Europe, and then you see a story of anti-Semitism in Europe that culminates with the Holocaust. And then you see Israel simply as the atonement, in other words, the making amends for the history of anti-Semitism. And so you have these two stories together, denial and ignorance on the one hand, on the other hand, a story, an affirmation of Israel. And they go together in the West. And it's really important to understand how this works. And so, in other words, in the West, this idea that the Germans are doing this, you see this, the British are doing this, the French are doing this, and the Americans are doing this, they really genuinely, for the longest time, believe that you could pretend that the Palestinians don't exist. And on the other hand, what does matter, what does exist, is the history of Western anti-Semitism and the atonement of this anti-Semitism. So they've created this story, talk about Orientalism, they've created this story where there's only three actors. There's the West, where the persecuted Jews, and of course there was, I'm not denying, there was actual persecution of the Jews, of course, and which culminated in the Holocaust in Nazi Germany. There is the story of the West, there's the anti-Semites in the West, and then there's Israel. So we have this triangle, but there's no Palestinians, there are no Arabs, and there are no Muslims. They don't exist. They simply don't exist. So denial of this history and another history there. And so what happens is, the way they think of this, they always think of Israel as good. Because Israel is part of a history they know. Palestinians are simply invisible. And so when Palestinians, when I or Hatem or anyone else, any of you, come up and say, well, hang on, we exist, we have a history, we're meaningful, we have rights, we have history, and yeah, We were not part of the Holocaust, we're not part of anti-Semitism, and we've never, it's not our problem, it's your problem, it's what happened in the West. They don't know what to do, they get confused, they get stunned, and so what they do is they end up, again, because of the denial, and because of there's a story here and there's no story here, there's humanity here and there's no humanity here, the way they think about us is this complete denial. So when Palestinians come up and say, we want justice, or we want freedom, whether you do it peacefully or you do it through armed struggle or whatever, however one does it, the way they interpret that is always through this narrative frame. You have no history, you don't belong, these people have history and they belong. And so what happens is there's a constant misrecognition. I refuse to acknowledge the fact that Palestinians have history, have humanity. And so what happens in the end, is this extraordinary story that you see over and over in all of this experience. For example, when Joe Biden was at the AME church just a few days ago, you've heard about the story, I'm sure, and you had a few brave people in the audience. This is a church which, of course, is a famous church in South Carolina. And in this church, you had a white supremacist a few years ago who shot several innocent black churchgoers. I mean, it was kind of a horrific massacre. And Biden was in this church. Biden, the same Biden who has overseen a genocide of Palestinians, has overseen the destruction of mosques and churches in Gaza. The same Biden genuinely believed when he actually said, I condemn, or he said something along the lines of, I condemn white supremacy. We have to acknowledge white supremacy, but he refused, of course, to talk about the Palestinians. They simply don't exist again. And there were a few brave people in the church who interrupted Biden and said, and called for a ceasefire, and called about what was happening. They were saying, we recognize the humanity of the people in Palestine. And we refuse to separate the struggle of the Palestinians from the struggle against racism in America. You can't be against racism in America and be for racism against the Palestinians. It's impossible. That's what those people were doing. The 4 or 5 or 10 people in the church who interrupted Joe Biden. What did the other ones do? If you follow the story. They shouted over the people who called for a ceasefire. What did they say? They said 4 more years. Not 4 more years of genocide, but they said 4 more years of Biden, which is tantamount to 4 more years of this kind of denial, this kind of history. And so for Biden and the people who support Biden, the issue is they don't want to see Palestinians. They can't see Palestinians, because if you see Palestinians, you recognize Palestinian history, you recognize the entire history of Palestine, its beauty, its history, its humanity, its culture, its coexistence that was all destroyed by Zionism in 1948, you'll recognize that there's no way to pretend that the West is moral and has come to terms with the Holocaust and anti-Semitism without understanding that it's come at the expense of the Palestinian people. In other words, the profound hypocrisy at the heart of Western culture, insofar as they think about Palestine. And so that's the situation we're in. We're in this situation. So what's the solution to end here? Just Hatem told me 20 minutes only. To end here, what's the solution? Like, how do we go forward? Other than the fact that there's a horror going on in Gaza, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm giving you any kind of great solution. But what's the way forward? The way forward is to always be confident, and especially young people here, always be confident in your history. It's really important for every single person to know their history. Especially if you come from Palestine or you have an empathy with Palestine or you understand Palestine. Understand that you come or you support or you stand in solidarity with a people, history, and culture, and beauty. And every single time anyone tells you something else, remind them, anti-Semitism comes from the West. Zionism emerged not in the Middle East, but in the West. Zionism was imposed on the Palestinians. Palestinians had a multi-religious culture that was destroyed and uprooted in 1948. I don't need to give you the whole history, people know this history, no doubt. And so there's a profound history, and so there's no way to stand against anti-Semitism and be anti-Palestinian. You can't do it. You either are against racism, or you're for it. You can't be against racism here and for racism here. It doesn't make any sense. And so that's really what I want to say. There's this constant dehumanization and decontextualization of the Palestinians. And the root of it is the erasure of a story. Remind them of the story, insist on the story, learn the story, learn Palestine, and you will be able to confront anybody who tells you otherwise. Because in the end, the history, and that's why I'm historian, the history is so clear. It's abundantly clear, it's obvious, it's absolutely obvious. Our history is honestly one of the people who were there who were uprooted. Our history is so basic, and our cause is so profoundly simple and beautiful. We want justice, we want equality. It's as simple as that. And the other side is resorting to what is resorting, which is why the world today sees Israel for what it is. And the world sees the Palestinians for who they are. So in terms of ending, in terms of where we are, in terms of where we go forward, how to end on a more hopeful note. Well, the hopeful note, of course, is, on the one hand, there is a global change. I see this as a professor at university. I teach 27 years. There is a huge change taking place on campuses across this country. Every single young person here knows this. When you're on campus, you see it. 27 years ago, when I started teaching about Palestine, people would come into a class and they would end the class being pro-Palestinian. They may not know very much at the beginning of the class, but by the end of the class, they were pro-Palestinian because most people around the world, irrespective of what faith or background they want to, sympathize with the underdog and the oppressed. And the Palestinians certainly have been oppressed. Today, however, when I go into a class, before I open my mouth, people are pro-Palestinian. There is a huge change taking place everywhere. And the South African case of the ICJ confirms this. This is a huge turning point. So yes, there is a huge amount of terror and oppression and injustice and violence, especially now, especially the people of Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem and other parts, but especially in this area, and especially Gaza, the most horrible place in terms of injustice in the world right now is in Gaza. But what's so amazing is that there are so many young people, a generation shift taking place, where people who are young understand the situation and are speaking out. And in the end, you can censor me, you can censor Hatem, I mean, they're not going to, but they can try. You can censor individuals. You can terrorize individuals. You can make people, individuals silent. You can make a group silent, but you can't make a whole generation silent. And that's where we are. That's where we're in terms of the story. So again, remember, tell your stories. It's really important. Know the history, because history is the Achilles heel. History is where we are absolutely vindicated, as well as in our humanity, our history as well. And the entire operation of Zionism is to erase our history as well as our humanity. And so the way to recover our humanity is to recover our history. So remember that always, please. There's a generation shift taking place. Justice is on our side, and hopefully soon justice will be achieved from the river to the sea. So thank you.
Thank you, Sam, for a beautiful speech, and remind all of us to take onto history. So I want people to actually pick the books. Palestine is an information-intensive cause, which means that you need to have the information. I'm not going to do a multiple choice quiz after the session, but it is. If you don't read, if you don't know the details, people will try to run all kinds of propaganda statements around. Professor Makdisi concluded by from the river to the sea, and that is the framing that now everybody is trying to say, well, you're engaging in an attempt to erase the Jewish people rather than to examine that Palestinians are not part of the story. So say from the river to the sea, Palestinians in 48 are discriminated against, 70 different discriminatory laws against them. If you're in the Gaza, you're an internationally dependent people. You are not part of any state. If you're in the West Bank, you're under military regulations and military regime. If you're in Jerusalem, you have an ID card, but you're not a citizen. And then if you're a refugee, whether in Lebanon, Syria, the exception of Jordan that have a citizenship, but it's still a different dynamic. So we're actually have completely been removed from the river to the sea, Yet those who have actually expelled the Palestinians are the ones that actually complaining with the possibility, right, of the notion that we might come back to our homes and land, right? So always insist on defining your own narrative, your own history, and don't apologize that you have the right to go back, right? حق العودة is a foundational element of Palestine. I know that they've been negotiating with Congo. Why don't Netanyahu go to the Congo? They will take it. Right? Why would Netanyahu, whose family is from Poland, he changed his last name? Right? His last name changed from Poland. So they're negotiating to transfer the Palestinians to the Congo or Chad, and without actually flinching about it. And some of the Arab and Muslim governments are engaging in trying to facilitate this. So this is the absurdity of the period that we are in. So thank you, Professor Makdisi. I know that you said you are going to leave. So Professor Makdisi he's not leaving because he doesn't want to be part of the program. He's traveling tomorrow. So thank you for being here, and also your lovely wife in the back. So thank you for being here with us as well. So our next speaker is Professor Ahlam Muhtaseb. He's a professor of media studies and the graduate coordinator of the Department of Communication Studies at California State University, San Bernardino. She's a faculty mentor awardee who she also won the 2019 Rebuilding Alliance Storyteller. Her work is profound, and this is something that you need to actually put on your list. The 1948 documentary, Creation and Catastrophe. This is one of the most important documentary relative to the Nakba. You know, the Nakba has been part of the erasure. It's illegal actually to teach the Nakba in Israel, but yet ministers today are saying to have a second Nakba. So you deny the first, but you insist on the second. Again, you can offer them maybe a few therapists in terms of the 12-step program to recover history of the Nakba, the first one. So I recommend for everyone to actually download, access the 1948 documentary, Creation and Catastrophe. Professor Ahlam Muhtaseb continue to work on this project. It's really, for me, is one of the most important documentaries. So, Professor Ahlam Muhtaseb.
Assalamu alaikum. Everyone. It's really a great pleasure and honor to be here today with you all. And thank you, Dr. Hatem Bazian and the Islamophobia Studies Center for inviting me. I think we are gathering in a time when we have a mixture of deep sadness, but at the same time, a lot of resilience, especially with what Dr. Makdisi said about the ICJ and taking Israel at class. Somebody is trying to actually have some justice for Palestinians and to stop the genocide in Gaza. Today I was asked to talk about, that was a good setup by Dr. Makdisi, to talk about specific examples of how manufacturing Islamophobia and weaponizing anti-Semitism against us, especially in the academic field or in academia, looks like. And I was asked by Dr. Bazian to talk about my own cases of censorship, hoping that maybe we can learn a few lessons from those. So I would be more than happy to share some of these examples, but at the same time, I would like to situate it in a broader context of such censorship and silencing. But let me first start by acknowledging that we are all congregating on the indigenous unceded colonized lands of the Ahlam people in Santa Clara, or what is known as Santa Clara. So with this acknowledgement, I would like to start. Let me test if this works. Okay, so yeah, it's gonna be a little bit challenging for me with two screens, but I think I can manage. So what we're talking today is not new. Of course, there was a huge rise in attacks on us after October 7. And the attitude is like, we can now do anything we want, basically. Like, this is the Zionist attitude in the United States. We attack and attack and attack, and nothing can stop us. And we will do anything to silence and censor Palestinian voices and those who are, supporting them or supporting justice, simply. I'm saying that those are not new because they have been documented over and over. I was, part of the executive committee of the California Scholars for Academic Freedom, and for years we worked on documenting, on responding to case after case after case. For a context, historical context, the Al Jazeera lobby documentary would be one of the best. And I'm sorry, I'm a professor of media studies, so the visual element of an argument is very crucial for me. That's why I use, the visual aspects in presentation. This is a great documentary. It's long, 3.5 hours, but it actually documents in detail all types of silencing, surveillance of the Israeli lobby on our community, especially in academia. Actually, I forgot to show you what you see. That's what I'm controlling too. So this is the documentary I'm talking about. And from that documentary, we actually learned that the suppression of Palestinian voices and this kind of surveillance and censorship is enabled with a lot of money in this country. We're talking about millions and millions put into manufacturing Islamophobia, into weaponizing anti-Semitism, in silencing and suppressing our communities. And actually, this is part of, this is part of the documentary. That specific part speaks about mobilizing donors against us in academia, which is now in the neoliberal, model of academia makes a huge difference because money talks, and this is why you hear about presidents of universities speaking against us, against students, like Students for Justice in Palestine, or MSA, Muslim Students Associations, across the country, and against faculty and staff as well. So, for a previous presentation I tried to come up with a list of the different arms and branches of AIPAC, the umbrella lobby in the United States for Israel, which is the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee, basically. And I came up with this list, and I know it's not comprehensive, but it gives you an idea about how when they attack in collectives and groups, and how it becomes so hard actually to fight against it. And every branch is well funded, and every branch has a system that is part of the bigger structure of AIPAC. And on top of those, as you see, I highlighted in yellow, is ADL. ADL stands for the Anti-Defamation League. The problem with this organization is actually very highly respected in the United States for fighting anti-Semitism and defamation, especially of course against Jews, etc. But people don't know how problematic this organization is. Not only in fighting Palestinians and those who support justice in Palestine or for Palestine, but also against all people of color and against a wide variety of activists. So I looked at, I want to highlight two aspects of the censorship and attacks happening now, especially in academia, and two forms, are at the top of these, and those are doxing, or for those of you who don't know the term, basically taking out our social media posts and what we put online and use it and weaponize it against us, take it to our presidents, to our associate presidents, our provosts, etc., and make a case around what we write, even outside of academia, not as employees of an institution, And they have been successful in many of those cases. But at the same time, I don't want us to lose hope. My message at the end, similar to Dr. Makdisi's message, is going to be one of hope, that actually we can fight this back and we can win big, actually. And this could backfire if we do it in collective labor and within collectives in our spaces. The second one is, and that has been like lately very serious, weaponizing the charge of anti-Semitism. And I'm not going to go into details about this, but part of the problem is weaponizing the IRA definition, which is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. That definition, of course, it's not an easy, straightforward definition. It's a working definition, and it actually doesn't have any legal standing. But it has been used, really, even by institutions of the United States government itself, to silence and suppress Palestinians, because part of it says that any discourse that is anti-Zionist or anti-Israel by default is by default anti-Semitic. And so we cannot criticize a country, a state, which is crazy. I mean, imagine if we say, if you criticize the state of Saudi Arabia, then you are engaging in Islamophobic discourse. You are not really criticizing the religion, you are criticizing a country, a political system. But that's how it has been weaponized against us. And most importantly, and I think Dr. Makdisi mentioned a few of these words, but weaponizing specific terminology like genocide, you said from the river of the sea, but also free Palestine, which is the case I'm going to talk about, that actually happened to me. I'm going to refer you to a very good article that was published by Mondo Wise on November 20th about the role of the ADL in such weaponization, and they actually document some of the cases that resulted from such censorship and attacks, and the outcomes of those, and how they impacted several of our organizations in the United States. I'm going to skip through those, sorry, but you can refer to the article because we don't have time. But it's very important, as I said, to recognize that those attacks are also weaponized against people of color in the United States, different activist groups, even, calling on the FBI and other governmental agencies to interrogate and investigate us, basically, and to take, action, legal action against us. And this is what has been happening to several of our organizations. I'm gonna mention a few cases, but before I leave that, there is a campaign because of all of that. It's not new. It has been going on for a few days, few years, and it's dropped the ADL campaign because it educates people that ADL is not the organization you think it is. And this is another source. This is a very recent, I don't know, probably Dr. Bazian knows about this, but it's a very recent report on Islamophobia. They have been working on it at the Rutgers University Law School, the Center for Security, Peace and Rights, for a year, but they delayed its release after October 7 to be able to actually add more of the cases that happened until they finally released it at the end of November. It's really worth looking at. It's a great resource, and I'm going to give you a summary, actually, of, they were too far here, but basically it argues, to summarize the whole report, that when Muslims and Arabs in America defend the rights of Palestinians or criticize Israeli state policy, they are often baselessly presumed to be motivated by a hatred for Jews rather than support for human rights, freedom, and consistent enforcement of international law. Like what is happening with the ICJ now. So even taking Israel to the ICJ is being accused actually as a form of anti-Semitism, which is just crazy, honestly. I'm going to talk now about my cases because I know I'm running out of time. I'm trying to be respectful. But I went through a lot, and I will highlight 3 cases. An older one, which is my documentary that you mentioned, thank you very much for promoting it. A documentary that my partner, Andy Turner, and I worked on for over 10 years. And as you said, we're still working on it. It's a huge amount of materials we have collected from archival images to interviews with Israelis, Palestinians, the majority authority historians on the topic, all the digging in the archives, including the Israeli archives, and filming in 7 countries, etc. But it was attacked by people who haven't even seen it. And every time we try to screen it, especially on campuses where, departments and colleges where, centers involved, not like student organizations, we were severely attacked. And the one that was, most serious is one that happened at Hollywood, which, we were supposed to screen at the city's human rights speaker series, and that made them just go crazy. This screening was canceled 3 times. So we would push back, that's what I'm saying, don't give up. Push back, and they would push back and get another cancellation. And we would talk to the city, and I had that talking about collective, working within collectives, without, California Scouts for Academic Freedom, without, different Palestine legal, friends, from academia, many professors wrote to the city, Robin Kelly, Judith Butler, Dr. Bazian, etc., and saying this is ridiculous. Even I have to say, my provost and my 2 deans supported me. I have a little bit different institution until very recently. That changed. Eventually, we succeeded. Of course, the charges, as you can see on the screen, have been supporting, and it was only attacking me, not my white partner when I defended. Mainly me. They wouldn't even mention him. Supporting terrorism, hateful, anti-Semitism, you name it, all the beautiful charges you always hear about us. But after 4 attempts, we screened on April 16, 2019. Thank you. And I'm not actually, to full house, probably I should have done this and just focus here. As you can see here, we could have screened maybe 50 people. They publicized the film for us that when we went to the screening, and there was a lot of police that they replied, but they brought it because there were, threats of, protests, etc. There was a huge line for people trying to get into the screening that they couldn't get in because it was sold out. So thank you, and its strategies, I guess. The current cases, these are a few current cases. I'm not going to go over them because I'm definitely running out of time, but you could check them out. And those I highlighted the ones that I was either, involved in them, or ones that got some attention and prominence in the United States. But there are many cases, and now it's even hard to, capture all of these. To the extent that ADL even accused Jewish Voice for Peace themselves of and identify them or categorize them as a hate group when they shut down Central Station. So that's just, as I said, sometimes it reached really crazy levels. And as I said, they just thought, we can do anything we want. Now, my 2 current cases, and I have few of them, but I'm going to talk about 2 of those. The first one that got a lot of attention worldwide is the National Communication Association Convention. So what happened is I was invited to deliver part of the presidential address of the National Communication Association Convention in Maryland on November 18th. And I was asked, actually, in an attempt to decolonize that space, to deliver my speech in Arabic. So with, translation behind me on slides. I did. I translated my speech. I prepared to deliver in Arabic, and I had the slides, and everything was ready. Everything sounded good. Of course, I committed to that before Gaza, before October 7th. So after October 7th, I told the president, I'm not going to ignore, the genocide. So I'm going to talk about that and center it. And after back and forth of maybe this and maybe that, and me insisting and saying maybe I shouldn't be part of that, he said, no, I want you to be part of that, and that's okay. Just go ahead and do it. So I wrote the speech, and they had the copy for a week. Everything was fine until the day of. And I was supposed to receive an award, actually for community-based research that helps community. And we were literally half an hour before, doing the rehearsals, the president came and said that he was told by two executives from the national office, and that's the elected president, that I cannot go. Only my speech couldn't go at that time. And I thought I was in disbelief for like the association that sent the speech as the business to silence me. And I said, what if we defy and go? And he said, well, probably security is going to come and take you down. I said, well, bring it on. I don't mind being arrested. But he said, please go on there. Thank you. People of color who are receiving awards, we don't want to destroy it for them. And then all the speakers with me said, if she doesn't go, we don't go. So, seeing that solidarity, we had to make a collective decision, and that decision was to all get out in protest and leave the celebration. Sorry, this is my speech in English, and it's going to be published. I'll show you what happened. And in Arabic. And this is an image of 100 scholars, half of the audience basically leaving the ceremony. After I stood up, so I'm going to go back a little bit. So I stood up when they announced my award. I said, I'm going to reject it, put duct tape on my mouth, stood in front of the stage for a few seconds, and left. And then everybody, waited a little bit, and then they left after me. And we all went outside and performed in the foyer, in the atrium of the hotel. And I believe that it wasn't a coincidence, talking about organizing, anti-Semitism, and all of these things. I think what happened during the day at noon, we decided to do a walkout. So when we walked out, and I was the main speaker, for the march, and we used also the same words, genocide, etc. And that's what I mentioned. They focused on two words in my speech: genocide and free Palestine. Now free Palestine is in charge. So they told us that they received a lot of complaints that people didn't feel safe and comfortable. Another way of weaponizing charges against us. This is the new thing now. Oh, I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel safe when you say these words. It's, as I said, we reached unbelievable levels. So I think because we did the walkout, it was very successful. 250 faculties, doctoral students, and basically scholars walked out with us from all backgrounds. And what I want to say is, many good things happened. It backfired in their faces. We persevered in multiple. For example, 10 editors of 10 scholarly journals, the leading scholarly journals in my discipline, and many of them are actually published by NCA itself. In defiance, they decided to publish my speech in English, in Arabic, my account, and my picture. So, we defeated their silencing. I could have been listened to by 200 people, and it's not about honesty, it's about Palestinians. They don't know me, they don't care about me, they don't care about. Although there is an element of Islamophobia, Dr. Makdisi, I think they thought I'm an easy target. They could take me on because I'm a woman of color with hijab, she wouldn't say anything. I honestly believe that was part of how empowered and entitled to suppress the presidential address of the elected president. So Islamophobia definitely was there. They didn't see me as a threat, as someone who's going to push back. Well, they were wrong, obviously. And also, now the two executives, so one of them was intern, and they said she wouldn't be hired again. The other was the executive director of NCA, and she was fired last week. So that's another way. A lot of things happen, many organizations, many divisions in NCA itself wrote letters, protests, they did a petition. many media interviews. Actually, until today, I received an interview from a scholarly blog in New Zealand who wanted to host me for an interview to talk about NCA and told me we are still pushing NCA for structural changes. We are going to change the culture of NCA forever. And that was my speech, by the way. My speech was the exclusion of certain, points of view and certain, people of color in general, and their inability to speak about their experiences. That's exactly what I was highlighting by Center Gaza. So a lot of structural changes are going to happen, alhamdulillah. And this is actually the editorial. I'm going to skip it that they sent. Lastly, my other documentary. So I am the producer of this documentary. Let's see, 30 seconds, portrait of a hate crime, and it's about the 3 young Muslims who were killed in Chapel Hill. It's about the case, the case of Islamophobia. Dr. Hatem Bazian in that documentary, by the way. And you can watch. I wanted to show the trailer, but I know I don't have time, so I'm gonna wrap up. But you can go online and watch the trailer. We were selected for premiering at the largest documentary film festival in the United States, which is Doc New York City Film Festival. It was a big deal, and we also were awarded with $40,000 for distribution grant from subject matter. Another great, achievement. So usually the university brags about those things. So they didn't find any story. I was surprised. They only put in the real links to the documentary website, this one itself, and to the website of the film festival. So I thought it was a mistake. So I emailed the staff member and I said, you forgot to link to the story itself. Because usually they write a long story and say all these things. And this is when the second thing happens. I received a letter from the Associate Vice President of my University for Strategic Communication, and he was reprimanding me in a very, again, talking about Islamophobia. He sent it only to me, and very patronizing. I'm a full tenure professor. I have weight in academia, and he can't talk to me like this on a subject that he has no clue about. He tried to define anti-Semitism for me and how using genocide constitute anti-Semitism and how it's dangerous. And this is the other interesting part. In his second part, he uses a word that I think came out from communication from ADL, which is sorry, I should have highlighted it. Actually, the second one. It's, the third line, flashpoint. You see flashpoint term? That leads to violence. He even accused me of inciting and causing harm and violence. And that comes from the book of ADL. So I submitted a FOIA of, the California National Corporate School, but like a Freedom of Information Act request basically to actually have access to his email. I should have received them yesterday, but we'll see if they are going to produce it or not. But don't, again, fight back. It doesn't matter. I responded to him. I'm sure he thought I could take it on, but I don't think he appreciated my response. I sent him a very long, detailed, well-researched letter, email, telling him you have no expertise whatsoever, other than being the PR person for the president at the university. And I have the expertise. And let me tell you my research. And all these people stating that what is happening in Gaza is a casebook, a textbook case of genocide. And that was before South Africa and ICJ and all of these things. And I call it, this is a lesson we can learn. Every, human rights organization, civil rights organization I know of, especially in California, all Palestinian organizations, including the Palestine Arab Muslim Caucus of our union, CFA, California Faculty Association, which I co-chair actually. And I said, to protect myself, I'm copying all these people, all the media outlets I knew of. And the second day, of course, there was an article about this in Inside Higher Education. It was a big scandal for the university to try to suppress me, really, and prevent me from using genocide. Literally, that was his contention. Like, we are not going to even say anything about your achievements if it is related to the use of the word genocide. And all I want to do about now is to talk about genocide. I sent him this. We did. Thank you. We sent him this. This is actually a webinar we did the week before, or 10 days before, on weaponizing anti-Semitism. We talked about exact issues. He could have attended. I sent him the link. And we had Judith Butler, who's a well-known, like the most famous and one of the most famous, philosophers in the world, who actually does work on the issue, and Keith Hellman and other, professors. And we told them that we already did this, and the university, it was on the Zoom of the university, actually. 700 people registered for that. 500 showed up to that webinar. Like, you could have listened to that and learned something, and learned not to suppress me in the process. And I want to end by saying, lesson number 1, push back and don't give up, and don't surrender, and don't throw your armor. FBI, I mean, figuratively, and number 2 is work with the collective. Without the amazing faculty, the amazing colleagues, the amazing community members who stood by me, I wouldn't have been able to do all of this by myself. I don't want you to think that I am exceptional, I get all the credit. Actually, even my students, my doctoral students, were the best. I want to thank, I'm going to use only the first names because they are vulnerable and I want to protect them. But I want to make sure I mention Sarah, I want to mention Bernardino, and I want to mention Naeem, and I want to mention Marwa. And there are others, but those were like mobilized, use social media. They wrote things, like they said, what do you want to do? We will do it for you. Because they knew I was overwhelmed. It's very overwhelming. It takes you away from the things you love to do, from the things you were hired to do. And that's what I told them. I was hired to do things, and now I have to leave everything. I have to leave teaching and respond to you and, do all the actions related. They are still hearing from people, having grievance, but we persevere, we fight back, and we never give up. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So don't give up and question, push back, and ask for allies. Their path to victory is silencing. So if you become silent, basically they have won. And literally, Islamophobia, Orientalism, people who want to silence any speech, any discourse relative to Palestine. So Professor Ahlam, your work is monumental, very important. The documentary, the 36 seconds is very important documentary is going to come out, and I think we will be previewing it in here. The case of Susanna Barakat and her family, so it's known to us. So we'll try to preview it in here, I think either in March or April, once it's available for showing, and it generates some solid discussion. Is Ala al-Bakri here? Okay, so. Well, Salahi, the Salah is in the back, he's there. He's coming to speak. While he's coming to speak, I want, you have envelopes on your table. We're not going to do any art or anything. So please, if you're able to donate to the Islamophobia Studies Center, fill out the form and try to donate whatever you can for the work. Again, we try to calculate it. It's $50 per research hour, so that's our calculation. So hopefully we'll get your ability to try to support the center. So Ala, cheers.
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. It's a, mashallah, pleasure and very energizing, reassuring, and powerful to be sitting down with brothers and sisters who are enlightened, who are focused, and who work around the clock for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we say for the sake of Allah, as we know, Allah does not need our help or work. You work for the sake of Allah when you work for the sake of His creation, when you work for the sake of justice, when you work for the sake of fairness, when you work for the sake of everything, even for the environment. When you try to save the environment, you're working for the sake of Allah. When you try to establish justice on earth, you're working for the sake of Allah. For us believers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran, He created us to know Him. And we think it stops there. If you read the Quran from cover to cover, you will find out that there is a purpose and there is a goal. The purpose is to know Allah, to love Allah, to worship Allah, and to obey Allah. That's the purpose, your relationship with Allah. That is supposed to translate in the real world into something beneficial to you and to the world. So how do you turn that purpose into goal? You will find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set for us 4 goals in the Quran. And the 4 goals are to speak the truth and tell the truth. And that means many things, one of which is to speak truth to power. To speak truth, Allah demands from us and expects from us to say the truth even if it's against ourselves, or our parents, or our relatives, or a rich person. This is an ayah I'm translating to you, a verse in the Quran. Allah expects us to stand up for the truth and to speak the truth and stand up for justice, even if we have to say something and be fair with people that we emotionally hate. وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا اعْدِلُوا هُوَ أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَىٰ. Do not let a hatred of the people in your heart make you be unfair with them. Be fair. That is closer to piety and righteousness. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects from us to speak the truth and to tell people about the truth. That's the other task, which you tell people there is God, there is Day of Judgment, there is heaven, there is hell, there is prophets, messengers, right, wrong, good, bad, truth, falsehood. Then you leave it up to them what they want to do after that. Second goal Allah set for us in the Quran is to establish justice. And justice has 2 branches, justice and fairness. For example, everyone should be treated the same under the law. That's justice. But when it comes to people who are physically challenged, we create a ramp for them, which means we spend more time and more money to give them access to the same building that a healthy person, just goes up the stairs. That's called fairness. Fairness does not mean everyone gets the same. Fairness means everyone gets what they need and what they deserve. So that's the second goal that Allah set up for us in the Quran. The third goal is to establish mercy. Justice by itself is not enough. You can establish justice and there will still be poor people and people who are in need and help. That's where mercy kicks in. And finally, Allah expects from us to establish excellence on earth. What I'm doing is I'm saving your time and translating an ayah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى. Allah commands you to establish justice, ihsan, excellence, and mercy, to be good to your relatives and be supportive to your community. So this is why Allah created us, to establish justice, establish mercy, establish excellence, and a big subtitle under excellence is moral excellence. Moral excellence. Allah puts us on earth to establish moral excellence. So whenever we talk about the center of Islamophobia here, what are we doing? We're fulfilling goal number 1. Speak the truth. Tell the truth. Inform people. Make it known. Once you speak the truth, interestingly, there is a trend that goes through history with all the prophets. You speak the truth, few people will believe, majority will chicken out, and few people will be oppressors, and the crowds will follow the oppressors. Same dynamics from Nuh alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, every prophet and messenger, one person will speak the truth, few people will believe in him. The majority will be silent. There will be a tyrant. The tyrant will have the power. The people will remain silent or support the tyrant. Interestingly, at the end, the few win. Because it doesn't make sense. Why? Because Allah stands with them. Because Allah is the truth and He stands with the truth. This, what we are seeing right now, what we're seeing right now, what's happening in Palestine, that we're losing our mind, like what's going on here? Like, okay, now, as she said, the sister before me, saying free Palestine is anti-Semitic, okay, or hurting someone's feelings. A clear genocide is happening. No, this is self-defense. Do you know this frustration that you're feeling? We are just, for the first time in our lives, we've experienced what prophets and messengers experienced their entire life. I want you to think of this. You know Isa alayhi salam? Isa alayhi salam. Isa, Allah summarized why he sent him 2 words. Jesus. He said to his mother, the angel he said to his mother, Allah brought this boy to life, وَلِنَجْعَلَهُ آيَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَرَحْمَةً مِنَّا وَكَانَ أَمْرًا مَقْضِيًّا. I brought Jesus, Allah says, to make him a miracle for people, to see that God can do anything and everything, and God is still part of human history. وَرَحْمَةً مِنَّا, and a mercy from us. How was Isa alayhi salam mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Basically, what Isa alayhi salam did, he had free healthcare, free education, and free welfare system. So when you come to Isa alayhi salam, he will do one of 2 things. From small food, he will feed the crowds. So the crowds will come. This is called free welfare. Then free education, he will sit down, teach them about God, about how to live their life, what's a better standards of life. Then the sick will come to him, and his thing in life was to touch people, anoint people. They'll bring the leper. When people suffering from leprosy, they say, Bismillah, and touch them. Now, if you know that this is transferable by touching, so it's contagious. But Isa said, Bismillah, and wipe, they heal. If you research today, leprosy, you need to take 21 antibiotics for 2 years in order to heal from it. It's a very stubborn bacteria. So even today, if Isa came today, it will still be a miracle. With all the advancements in science. You understand? What did Isa alayhi salam get from the disbelievers, not the totality, from the disbelievers of the children of Israel at this time? He was a threat to them. They chased him to kill him. You can imagine, free healthcare, free education, free welfare, feeding. And what do you get in return? People are running after you to kill you. Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, Allah mentions in the Quran that him and Sayyidina Dawood, even with the disbelievers in their community, they've reached to a level where Allah said they sat on the literally, and they kept on saying, La'natullahi alaykum, La'natullahi alaykum, La'natullahi alaykum. May Allah's curse be upon you. Imagine the level of frustration that Isa alayhi salam. Where do I get this? الآية طبعا لعن الذين كفروا من بني إسرائيل على لسان داود وعيسى بن مريم. Why? ذلك بما عصوا وكانوا يعتدون. That's because of how aggressive they were with them. They will go overboard. They, like عداوة, transgression, to transgress. This, what you're feeling today, is what prophets and messengers have felt all of their lives. Same story with Noah, 950 years. At the end, Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam said, please Allah, wipe out the earth. And the flood came. You understand? What we're witnessing to, we are meant to witness. Just to get it from you from the end. If everyone is saying, oh, I wish this was not happening, so what do you wish? I wish everybody was living in peace. Okay, you know what that is? Jannah. Would you like to die? That's where it happens. Here, this is the test. Make peace with it. Now, Allah Azza wa Jal, I'm from a spiritual, from a Quranic perspective, I'm going to repeat what the speaker before me said in one ayah. This ayah is repeated twice in the Quran, but with 2 different words. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us in the Quran, this is in Surah Al Imran, إِنَّمَا ذَلِكُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ يُخَوِّفُ أَوْلِيَاءَهُ فَلَا تَخَافُوهُ وَخَافُونِي إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. That is Shaitan using his scare tactics to make his followers fear him. Now, if you read the Quran well, you know that Shaitan is not only the jinn. As a matter of fact, that's the easy Shaitan. But Allah said in the Quran, Shayateen al-Insi wal-Jinn, and mentioned the human before. So actually, just to add to your information, the word Shaitan is not reserved in the Quran for an unseen jinn. it's actually to describe a human. A human. And as I tell our youth in high school and in college, I say you really have to be careful, because if a shaitan that is jinni comes to you and say like, do this, haram, do this, what do you have to say? A'udhu billahi minash shaitan rajim, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and he will be running 200 miles per hour away from you. But when your bad friend sitting in front of you say, oh, come on, let's go to that club, let's go do this haram, that haram, let's try it out, and you say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitan rajim, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, you will be still sitting right there. So it's more dangerous than the unseen, but because we don't see the jinni one, we fear, and we're scared of the jinni one more than we're scared from the one we see. Because we're human beings, we don't like what we don't see, that's why we hate darkness. So Allah says, the tactics of shaitan is that he what? He threatens his followers. These shayateen are threatening their followers, and they want to practice that fear mongering on us. Now, what's the problem? They're facing believers, like our sisters. May Allah reward. May Allah reward. And Dr. Hatem, Bazian, and all the people who work in this field. What are they doing? Then what they're getting back, you're not getting scared. Why you are not getting scared? Can you please get scared? No, I'm not. Because Allah said, فَلَا تَخَافُونَ. So do not fear them, and fear me, Allah Azza wa Jalla said, if you are believers. In another ayah in Surah Al-Ma'idah, فَلَا تَخْشَوُوا النَّاسَ وَخْشَوْنِي. In this ayah, فَلَا تَخَافُوهُم, which is word for khashya. Khawf is fear, like your heart is full of fear. Khashya is the fear before the fear. Like, I'm afraid they will do this to me. Fear from something. Fear, khawf is like you saw the lion. Khashya is the thing in the bush is a lion or not? That's khashya. The lion showed up, now that's khawf. So whether the lion is hiding or the lion is in your face, what does Allah tell you? Don't fear. It's very difficult. And if you read the courageous people around the world, what do they say? Fear, courage is not the absence of fear, but courage is the ability to overcome the fear. So do I feel afraid? Do you feel afraid? Yes, of course. That's normal. Even from the enemies of Allah. Even from do we? Yes. But for you not to give in to that fear and stand up and talk is what makes you a believer and is the test that we're going through. And believe me, brothers and sisters, at the end, they will all, Allah shows us in history, and I want you to see this in all the stories of the Quran. Every tyrant overplays his role, overplays his hand. What happened with Pharaoh? He went, he overplayed Uncle, kill all the pigs. Okay, can we not kill them all because we're not going to have slaves? So in odd years, we kill the babies. On even years, we don't kill the babies. Okay, do that. When he overplayed his hand, Allah sent Musa to his house. Every tyrant, when you read in his book, the tyrant, and Namrud, the time of Ibrahim, he played. What are we bringing Ibrahim? Who's this? Because he heard that Ibrahim was thrown in the fire and the fire didn't burn him. So he summoned Ibrahim alayhi salam. He said, well, what kind of God do they? He overplayed. When he overplayed, Allah sent a mosquito or an insect, one of these bugs, walked through the nose, settled in the sinus, and started eating on the mucus and eating his brains from inside, basically. And he would ask his servants to hit him with a shoe because when it started moving inside, he doesn't know how to get rid of it, and they didn't have surgeries at that time. So he died from a small insect. Every tyrant, it does that. Genghis Khan came to the Muslim world, wiped out Khawarizm kingdom all the way to Iran, then wiped out the Abbasid kingdom in Iraq and in Syria, and they were coming to wipe out, subhanAllah, the Muslims in Egypt, and that was the last front. Two things happened. They overplayed. They said, oh, these ones will defeat them. So Hulagu, Genghis Khan died. Hulagu wanted to be close because he wanted some position of leadership. So he took most of the army, went back to Mongolia, and he left around 200,000. Of the 200,000, 150,000 participated in Ain Jalut, and they got defeated. It hit them so hard because Genghis Khan told them, you will never be defeated. It hit them so hard that they ended up converting to Islam. The long story short. It happened over time, but that's how it moved. So what we are dealing with here is something that happens again and again and again. And I want to say, my dear sisters, I'm going to tell you something that I've learned from someone, a Muslim member in our community actually here, that brought a Jewish Zionist member, added them to their non-for-profit organization board. Why? To help them raise funds. What is the model of the Zionist when it comes to giving funds? I have learned this just 2 weeks ago, like 1 month ago. Give until it hurts. And that's how they're doing everything. So basically, this Zionist person went to a Jewish person and asked him to get a donation. So he gave $500,000. He said, you didn't give until it hurt. You gave me 500,000 and you have 50 million? No. He kept on nagging and nagging and nagging and nagging and nagging until he walked out with $20 million out of 50 million. And he said, now you stand up for your people. Now you give until it's more, close to half of your wealth, right? My dear brothers and sisters, if you want to make history, you don't make it with the crumbs of your money. You don't make it with the leftover of your time. You don't make it with the leftover of your energy. You make it with the cream of the crop. And I think, mashallah, our brother here, Hatem Bazian, and the whole organization, it's an institution, it's not one person. They have done, I mean, come on. I mean, may Allah Azza wa Jal, I don't like to praise him in this case, but come on. Taking on Zionism, then as if that's not enough, going to France and having a conference about France, about discrimination in France. They're not nice, you know. They are the Ferinja. You know Ferinja? You know that the Crusaders? The Ferinja. Do you know that Ferinja are the French? The word French came from the word Ferinja. That's what the Arabs, the Muslims call it. These are the Crusaders that when they went and passed by Constantinople, they destroyed Constantinople 2 years before Muhammad al-Fatih opened Constantinople. They say Muhammad al-Fatih was able to conquer it because the Ferinja did half of the job for him. The Muslims did not touch the civilians. They kept on asking the controller of Constantinople to open. When he opened the door just to pass through, they destroyed the whole city. These are the Ferinja. Then, as if that was not enough for Brother Hatem and his organization, he had to go and take on India, the largest democracy in the world. I mean, I don't know. Then he's taking China. Yeah. How many continents left? I don't know. You understand? So this is only by the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for us to actually be part of this endeavor is actually an honor for us, alhamdulillah. We are doing stuff that big prophets and messengers were able to handle. You know, even in the Bible, which makes me, wonder why you're not reading that to my Christian brothers and sisters with all love and respect, because I have a lot of, it says, Jesus said to God when he saw crucifixion coming to him, God, if it is your will that I do not drink this cup, please do not make me drink it. Yeah, the cup of the test. But if it is your will that I drink this cup, I will drink it. It's a symbolic act. If you can make me spare this crucifixion, please help me. But if it's your will that I have to be crucified, okay, I'll take it. And Allah, from an Islamic point of view, made him, spared him the pain. SubhanAllah. So sometimes even prophets and messengers, like there's certain things are, alhamdulillah, that Allah has honored us at this time. Do not complain about these challenges. Look at yourself. Read your name. I don't know if your name is in front of you. Read your name and realize that you are not here by mistake. Allah has chosen us for this time. And Allah has chosen this time for us. And it's only a matter of few days before we're all buried within, there's my generation, 20 years if you're lucky, and we'll be all gone. So the idea here is, this is exactly what Allah wanted. The Muslims that faced the Mongolians and the Tatar, they were not complaining, they had to face. The Muslims that faced the Crusaders, they had to face. And the Muslims that today face something new that the world had not seen before, with this blatant, dishonesty on every level, that's our test. We cannot complain, nor we can run away. We have to take it head on. Thank you, Allah, for creating us for these times. Thank you, Allah, for creating these times for us. Thank you, Allah, for giving us a challenge that you only give to prophets and messengers. Allah must be taking very hard words for us to be handling this pressure. And for the people of Gaza, I mean, zero credit, all the credit goes to Allah Azza wa Jalla, but to the people of Gaza, what they're going through, I have said it on the member, my dear brothers and sisters, Sahaba themselves have not faced the test that people of Gaza are facing today. Show me a single incident in Syria that the Mushrikeen were able to bombard the houses of Sahaba and kill their men and women and children. Never. What these people are facing, Sahaba did not face, but they are facing it with the same level of Iman of Sahaba. You know, telling you, this is crazy. And for us to be living at the same time and place where a whole generation, 2.2 million, that represents the generation of Sahaba is again another honor for us to be living at the same time. And listen to be able to it. And how do I do this? Who's gonna? The God? 25,000? My hand is itchy, you know, this is what I do, you know. We need 25,000. Give until it hurts. If you don't give until it hurts, you miss the point of this test that Allah put us in. The people of Gaza gave everything. No one is asking you to give everything. Give from your money until it hurts. This is not a joke. If these days pass and you do not do your best, you have missed the highest, biggest opportunity of honor possible for any human in dunya or in akhirah. Jazakumullah khair, barakallahu feekum.
Jazakumullah khair. I asked him just to speak, so if you guys, you have the envelopes, just make your donations. You know exactly how much you want to donate at this particular time. So if we could, I'm gonna go over my presentation. So if we could start it. It's gonna be a challenge for me with, maybe I could come and you could change the camera down below. I don't have a Superman eyesight. I already have with my glasses, but I'm going to stop in here. Palestine Islamophobia industry and the business of demonization. When we speak about Islamophobia, we're speaking about an industry. We're speaking about almost 110 groups that are working to demonize and target Muslims, and this is a transnational network. That's very important, transnational. Brother Matt said that I took on the US Islamophobia industry. We have a report on Christian Zionism. We have a full report on Islamophobia in France, a full report on Islamophobia in Canada, Islamophobia in India. We actually did 3 reports on India. Because the network is transnational. So it's very important to do. Brother Omar, I wanted to actually, Brother Omar is running for the legislature, so I want to make sure that we know to support him. This is not from Islamophobia, it's me personally, I'm supporting.
We're a nonprofit.
I know, I can, but I personally, as a personal person, I'm supporting him personally. Because I saw you that you're leaving. This is very important for Muslims. How many in here? We have Aisha at 8. So when everybody come back for my speech, it's okay. I could send it to you, you know, on a Zoom link. So inshallah, let's pray Aisha, and then I'll come back for my speech. But I wanted to recognize Omar here. He's running. He's the vice mayor right now. We have a number of other people are running. It's very important. It's not from Islamophobia Study Center. It's a personal speech and endorsement for you. So thank you. So let's pray Aisha and then come back. demonization. And this is both building on what Professor Ussama Makdisi and then Professor Ahlam and Muhtaseb have spoken about. Is this movement? It's not. Okay. So this was a campaign that was carried out on campus. So you come to the UC Berkeley, San Francisco State, and other, and these were posters all over the campus. Right? Terrorists supports UC Berkeley, supporters at UC Berkeley, myself, Judith Butler, and others. This also was San Francisco State University. Same time, also in New York. Which means that this is people with large amount of money to be able to hit a number of places. And then also on the cards on my own street in Berkeley, where I live. I got up in the morning and all of the car windshields in my street were covered with this posters, making, again, myself and then the executive director of Jewish Voice for Peace calling us terrorists to all of the neighbors. Same time in New York. So, which means that you're dealing with a large amount of money, large amount of resources being directed. San Francisco State, Professor Abdel Hadi, similarly facing a similar strategy, where also a leader of the Hamas PDS campaign, right? So this attempt to create association, demonization toward faculty member. Now, Abdel Hadi is the faculty member that led the program Arab Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies in Ethnic Studies. And she's been constantly under attack for this. So this is Ahmed, an attempt to try to derail a program that attempts to provide studying the experience of Arab and Muslims, both in the United States, also within a transnational understanding. So if you look at the United States, there's only few programs that actually studies the experience of Arab and Muslims on their own narrative and with their own stories. Most of the programs study it from almost either antagonistic or are located in Middle Eastern studies. So you want to speak about Muslims, we'll go to Middle Eastern studies. If you want to speak about, so this is one of the only programs, or another one in Michigan, Dearborn and Ann Arbor. There's a program also in Columbia University, so it's only a few. And then also, you have a program as well, and I know that you got some support.
Decolonize the name.
Decolonizing the name. So that's very important in terms of why is academic programs important, because you have the impact of trying to actually get the students and the future generation to learn and study something that is different than the norm. And this has an impact. You know, myself, just thinking about the students that went through my classes, about 7,500 students that have been introduced to various materials that otherwise would not be possible. So it's very critical to understand the importance of having faculty members that are representative from our community. Here's something that will shock you. There are only 13 Palestinian faculty in all of the UC system. All the UC system, the 11 campuses, there's only 13. 4 of them are at UC Berkeley. Right? That's it. Across the UC system, you're talking about a total of 13 faculty members. And we get our share, almost like 80% of the attacks, the 4 of us gets it, right? On a regular basis. You think of the narrative, you think like there's so many Palestinians that are teaching in the UC that they took over the university. Again, they over-exaggerate who we are, maybe because we eat a lot of math, it gets a lot of energy in that way. But literally, this is the UC system, 13 faculty members, and we know each one of them by name, and we're in communication. So that's the struggle for us to make sure that we have the faculty that are in those departments. So again, 13 years attack on Rabah, and she continues to be under attack as we speak. Taking back to UC Irvine, the Irvine 11. Right? The Irvine 11 controversy was a controversy following a protest staged by students against a speech given by Israel Ambassador Michael Oren at the University of California, Irvine. 11 students protested the speech. They were actually prosecuted by the district attorney. Now, I've been protesting, right? That's why I have a PhD in protest, right? I have been protesting at the university way from 1987. I protested on almost every cause. Never in my life have actually got a district attorney to be involved to charge 11 students for no other reason than standing and actually shouting at a speech. Right? So they actually were charged. They had to face court proceedings. And now, if you actually talk about doxing, they've been doxed since that time. Each one of these 11, every time you actually search their name and you try to look who they are, this information is about them. And the university was coordinating this attack on them with the pro-Israel forces. Right? Students for Justice in Palestine, how a student group is politicizing a generation of Palestine. And so making the student group a problem. Now, if you look at the history of the United States, almost every cause that we have under the sun, students were central to it. What would the Vietnam anti-war movement be without students? The free speech movement, the labor movement, the suffrage movement, were all centered on college campuses and students. So in here, the criminalizing and attempting to target students for justice in Palestine. Framing SJP in the negative, how a pro-Palestinian campus group became a national lightning rod. It's a negative. You know, when students that were organizing against sweatshops, oh, they were hugged. You know, in Berkeley, we hug trees, which is good. It's a sunnah. Right? We celebrate it. We don't say students hugging a tree are lightning. Why is framing the students negative and allowing the campaign to criminalize the students, right? So in here, trying to target the students. In Florida, the DeSantis have shut down all of the SJPs. Now they have a lawsuit against the state of Florida, the SJPs. Columbia University, likewise, have suspended JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, and SJP. On the premise, they changed the regulations the night before and then suspend them for violating the regulations. Right? So in the university, everybody knows, and anyone who worked in the university, I know Professor Iyad Qazzaz, who are senior in here from Sacramento State University. Any policy on campus usually takes semesters because faculty will actually debate will or shall, then or now, right, in order to get the policy. But in here, Columbia, supposedly a liberal arts institution, overnight changes the policy and charges the student group who violated the policy is suspended. Right? So again, these are the attacks. Ways and Means Committee hearing. They had a whole hearing, lawmakers to cut federal funding to college over anti-Semitic activity, push for federal probes of SJP and AMP. I'm just like really excited that the Ways and Means Committee that deals with the U.S. funding, with the budget, took a total of 4 hours to discuss SJP and AMP. Right? And the discussion, again, they're trying to create the conditions to close down all of the SJPs nationally by creating a material support connection. That's the strategy. In order to do this, you throw all kinds of literally garbage and to see what might stick in order to carry out that strategy. So now in Congress, and you saw the show with bringing the president of MIT, Penn State, and Harvard, and creating a show. It's literally McCarthyist for people who watch McCarthyist era. Literally, we are watching watching a McCarthyist era unfolding in front of our eyes in real time. Have you ever been a member like that type of content? Legislating limits on PDS. U.S. states use anti-boycott laws to punish responsible business. So now in many states, 34 states have legislation where if you engage in PDS, you are not allowed to engage in business with the state. And a number of cases made it to court. We won some of the cases, but also the Supreme Court actually maintained the legislation or the law in some states. So that's a battle that is taking place, and it is literally inability of pro-Israel speakers and organizations to argue their points. So the only way is to muzzle and silence people. So that's the strategy that they are pursuing. Now we need to speak of, this is nothing new, right? You have to know Stephen Emerson. Even though he is no longer being interviewed on the news, most of the information that we get that target the Muslim community comes from one of his organizations, Investigative Project on Terrorism. Right? Investigative Project on Terrorism. Literally, his information, his material is piped into many of those individuals in leadership position, and it becomes a fact. Every Muslim leader in the United States has a file that has been put together by Stephen Emerson and the Investigative Project on Terrorism. Just think of the operation that is needed to collect information, to have the data, to have almost every speech that is uttered, is recorded and filed and continue to be used as a way to target individuals. David Horowitz, right? David Horowitz, Front Page Magazine, and also much of his information goes into the Canary Mission. Right? So, Canary Mission. When he published this book, I was in the airport and I picked up the book, I was number 32. Positively now, I'm number 1, thank God, right? Which means I have been doing my work. So again, Horowitz was after or developed what's called the Bill of Rights for Students. So now the debate that is taking place in Congress, and we see some of the bill here in Sacramento, try to have an oversight and to regulate campus activity around issues of Palestine and anti-Semitism. You actually have to take a look at Horowitz and his work that literally seeded the ground that we are seeing today. And it's important for us to understand the need to push back and the need to actually challenge it at every corner. So that's basically an attempt to try to contain and regulate free speech, academic freedom, constitutional rights. Creating the Islamophobia imaginary in public space. Right? These are the ads that were here in San Francisco, right, on the buses. Right? It says, in any war between the civilized and the savage, support the civilized man, support Israel, defeat jihad. Now we counter these ads with ads that we put on the buses. As a result of our challenge, and I would have, again, to give credit to the Zionists, they do their work. They the regulation in the city, so now we are unable to put political ads on buses in San Francisco. So again, the battle is not only immediate, you have to be engaged in the battle for the long term to understand. My sense today is many of the pro-Israel organizations, the ADL and others, are recommending policy changes on campus, policy changes in terms of hiring, policy changes in HR department, policy changes at every level. So we need to be aware it's not only going out to the protest, which we always have to do, is to actually make sure that you actually have a seat where these policy changes are taking place and challenge them. I know that, I don't know how many lawyers we have. Lawyers, I want you to file as many lawsuits as possible. I have so many lawsuits that I would like to file. We need to file them. They filed a lawsuit against Harvard just yesterday. We need some Muslim lawyers to continue to file lawsuits. Not that you're going to win them, but then use the lawsuits in order to negotiate settlement, and those settlements tend to be worse than possibly winning in the court. So you need to understand the strategy behind lawsuits that the Zionists are filing, because the university is already bending backward. So the lawsuit becomes, let's actually have a mediation session. And the mediation session, you have ADL in there, you have AJC, you have Zionist Organization of America, you have all these individuals coming, and the university, again, leadership often is always looking to move up. So they are going to try to settle and give, in the mediation sessions, more leverage. This is what happened in San Francisco State University. Literally, basically, they gave almost the house in the negotiation. So we have to develop the strategy, legal strategy here. I want you to look at Daniel Pipes. One of the most important statements that continue to be with us, right? He says, I worry very much from the Jewish point of view that the presence and increased stature and affluence and enfranchisement of American Muslims will present true dangers to American Jews. He should say American Zionists. He's saying Jews, that's a reference, but that's basically what it is. He's one of the granddaddy of the Islamophobia industry. Now, the unfortunate thing, he actually goes to train the Muslims on how to deal with Muslim organizations and so on. He actually does training in the United Arab Emirates. Right? So not only we have to deal with Islamophobes here, but actually going to the Muslim world to tell them how these Muslims that are here in the West or in your neighborhoods are very dangerous. And so that's how absurd it is. We've reached a level of absurdity in relations to him. But he was speaking in relations to Palestine. Now, the language that they use in the media and the political leadership actually comes from the Israel Project's 2009 Global Language Dictionary. It is not coincidental that when you actually listen to any article that comes out from any of the mainstream media, they replicate the Israeli talking points. If you notice, as soon as October 7th occurred, everybody was using Hamas is ISIS, right? That was not coincidental. That was the Israeli framing. And everybody began to amplify it and replicate it, and that became the way to reframe it. When this was actually put out, it says every time you speak about Israel, it says Hamas is Al-Qaeda. You have Ussama bin Laden, right? And we have Yasser Arafat. So again, they gave him exactly what needs to be said. And whenever you see an Israeli spokesperson, they're replicating these talking points at the national and international level. Right? Now, Islamophobia in defense of Israel, the attack on Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Keith Carson, Keith Ellison, and others, is a strategy. Now, in this coming election, AIPAC is putting $100 million to defeat what they consider to be the squad and individuals that are anti-Israel. So they're targeting Ilhan Omar, they're targeting Rashida Tlaib. In Rashida Tlaib district, they offered $20 million for someone to run against her. Now, any congressional seat is about 3 to 5 million. For somebody to offer 20 million to run in a congressional seat is unheard of. But what is very important for us is the person whom they offered 20 million went on Twitter and said, AIPAC offered me 20 million and I will not take it. That's a new phenomenon. Right? Then they went to an Arab guy running, offered me 20 million. Likewise, he went out on Twitter and said, you are crazy to think that I will take your money. Meaning that we have witnessing a change, because 10 years ago, to go against AIPAC would be unheard of. To go against AIPAC publicly is almost like it's a suicide, both for your current career and your future career. The fact to do it on Twitter or X shows you that we have reached a different moment in political mobilization and change relative to what this pro-Palestine activism that has developed in the country. So Zionism and academia, how and why Israel lobby is suppressing free speech and academic freedom on college campuses. We had a full journal, American Studies Association. We had a full journal focused on academia and what is taking place. University president and administrators become levers in the massive pro-Israel propaganda machine and provide the lubricating oil for the structured Islamophobia campaign that targets Arabs, Palestinians, Muslims, progressive Jews, and their allies on college campuses and in the community. It is not coincidental that you get these presidents writing statements of condemnation. I would bet once we get the FOIA and the Freedom of Information request that these talking points and the framing was sent to them by the ADL or AJC, JCRC, or sometimes they coordinate with the academic liaison in the Israeli council. We know this for a fact during the BDS campaign at UC Berkeley. The chancellor was in complete communication with the ADL and also with the Israeli council on a first-name basis. Now, to think about it, a chancellor of a university communicating with a representative of a foreign country to suppress the rights of U.S. students that are speaking about a country that is violating international law and is being funded by our taxes. That's how what you call insidious of a process that is taking place, and that's why university presidents are acting almost overboard to suppress pro-Palestine activism, because again, it's one of those third rails of upward mobility in college campuses. All right. Now, this is San Francisco Federation funding Islamophobia. San Francisco Jewish, how many of you knew this? That San Francisco Jewish Federation. San Francisco, I know some of our community like to have what you call dialogue, right? Like they want to have a dialogue with this person. They're so happy, say, Assalamu alaikum, Allah, hummus and falafel, we have shared cuisine, right? But at the same time, the Jewish Federation of San Francisco, Jewish Federation of New York, Jewish Federation of Chicago, Jewish Federations, different places, I have all the tax returns. Right? So I have all the tax returns, so you actually can download the 990 of these organizations, and you see where they're funding and what they actually fund and what donations. So the Jewish Federation of San Francisco and the Helen Dillon Family Foundation fund far-right and anti-Muslim groups, and I can prove it. Again, we could prove it with, they funded Project Veritas, the Amcha Initiative, the American Freedom Law Center, American Freedom Defense Initiative, the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and down the line. The Dutch politician, does anybody know who Geert Wilders is? Geert Wilders, the guy who with the Prophet ﷺ cartoons that promoted in the Netherlands and started to have this competition of who can actually draw more, was funded by the San Francisco Federation. It's right there on their tax returns. That's what they funded. Right? Extensive record of funding bigotry, protecting Israel through Islamophobia, how Chicago Jewish Federation fund anti-Muslim hatred, right? For Jewish Federation, left wing on Israel, bad anti-Muslim radical right. Good. Again, I say that the ADL, AJC, Jewish Federation's mainstream Islamophobia in the political circles and among civil society. Right? Emerson and Daniel Pipes are on the fringe, but these major organizations made it possible for Islamophobia to be center stage. And therefore, after October 7th, all of a sudden people will hear what happened with all this Islamophobia. We thought that we did a lot of dialogue. We had a lot of kosher halal gatherings. And we went on to joint trips to Palestine with you. We got to visit Al-Aqsa and all of this. Where is this coming from? Because again, they were still working on maintaining the Islamophobic discourse. And it came back almost immediately and instantaneously. Right? Rosenberg, who at the time said, they believe that the more acceptance there is of Muslims here at home, the less reflexive hatred there will be for Muslims abroad. and that, in their view, reduces America's sympathy for Israel. To stop Islamophobia and national security concern to pose the GOP in the midterm election. So that was during the midterm election. So the Islamophobia Zionist network that is at work in here, they want to have reflexive hatred. So when we say 10,000 Palestinian kids died, well, you know, they're not the right kind of people. Right? So you get people that say, well, their death doesn't count because they have reflexive hatred toward the whole category of Palestine. As I said, there is no innocent in Gaza. That statement, again, is built on this reflexive hatred. Israel recasts during post-Cold War, Israel recasts its role to counter and prevent Islamic extremism and Arab nationalism. So that's become the go-to after the Cold War. Reassert its strategic value in a unipolar world, speak of common threat with the West. That's why I always say we are facing Islamic terrorism and Islamists. Expand its foreign policy reach so as to become more viable. India, China, Sub-Saharan Africa, as well as now increasingly the Arab world. Most of the Arab world is actually normalizing, and become the go-to expert on countering Islamic ideologies and movement, including all of the trainings. We got to expose this during the Ferguson protests, and then the George Floyd. Turned out most of the police departments were being trained in Israel, right? Or those who were trained right here in Alameda, Urban Shield was being trained jointly with the Israeli security forces. And so again, Israel makes a lot of money out of this framing. Who is producing Islamophobia? Pro-Israel activists have been the major contributors to the financing, production, distribution, and usage of Islamophobia in the American context. So 70% of all the funding for the Islamophobia industry in the United States comes from pro-Israel sources. So when somebody says, I want to have a relationship with the Muslims and we want to work against Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, tell them to go and stop the funding for the Islamophobia industry that is coming from pro-Israel sources and from Zionist organizations. That's what you need to tell us. If you want to have a dialogue about stop funding Islamophobia. That's what you need to tell these individuals and the group, because often they come that we want to have a dialogue, but the dialogue, again, you're funding and demonizing structurally, and then on the side, you're engaging in public relations efforts. Institutions that fund and promote Islamophobia, almost every one of these organizations is led by a pro-Israel personality and pro-Israel person. Again, Jihad Watch, Canvas Watch, American Freedom Defense Initiative, Washington Institute of Peace Policy, Center for Security Studies, Middle East Forum, and so on. So every one of these organizations, some are multi-million-dollar budgets. So that's what you are facing in terms of organization. Again, Robert Spencer with Gerd Builder. These are the major initiatives that we are facing, attacking and constantly demonizing Islam and Muslims. When Jewish leaders decide to harass college kids to support Israel, this is Canary Mission, right? So Canary Mission and almost every activist on college campus and every activist in the community now is being targeted by Canary Mission. In 2005, the Jewish community strategy shifted. Leaders who favored aggressive confrontation with perceived enemies, particularly critics of Israel, won out. So that's where we get this Canary Mission campaign. I do think that Canary Mission is beginning to get a diminished return. When it was 100 individuals that you're targeting, maybe there was some possibility. Once you get into the 1,000, it's not possible to actually have a strategy that have thousands, and now we might get into the tens of thousands of individuals. Not giving them free advice, but again, they're reaching a diminished return because there's so many people that are active and so many people that they are targeting. The PDFs, when Jewish leaders decide to harass, again, an online backlist called Canary Mission, which went live in 2015. Now, I do think that Muslims need to begin to think about lawsuits against these individuals and these organizations, I know defamation is very high-standard, but we could actually pursue strategies to see what legal actions can we take, especially they are making anyone that is expressing their constitutional right. I think we might have developed an idea that these organizations are undermining the first amendment, amendment of the Constitution, the right to free speech, the right to freedom of association, even the right to freedom of press, because some people like to publish in journals as Palestinians are targeted. So this is something for our legal minds to think whether its lawsuit on violation of the First Amendment rights is actually something that we could pursue. All right, well, it's possible not. Again, we are facing a lawsuit that is completely on absurd theory of being an ulterior ego of some other group. Right? So it's a theory that they're testing by filing a lawsuit. All that we need is a lawsuit to delay, and cause demonization. So this is again my profile in Canary Mission, right? But again, this has become almost a norm for many of the groups and organizations that are there. So, Women's March in Israel, the largest modern march in the history of the United States, was led by a minority women. One of the women is Linda Sarsour, a Palestinian. The Women's March was attacked, by a campaign for no other reason than Linda Sarsour said, "I'm proud Palestinian," and she spoke as a Palestinian. So the attack against her was specifically because of her Palestinian identity and the fact that she spoke from that vantage point. Right? So these are the three women, what Women's March co-chair, Tamika Malloy, Carmen Perez, and Linda Sarsour are doing that. Each one of them were attacked differently. Right? But in general, the attack was centered on the Women's March took a pro-Palestine position early on, and that became a major point of attack, which is same also for Black Lives Matter. Right? Both were attacked because of their Palestine positions. Right? How to fight delegitimization, the Ruth Institute report in early 2000. What we are facing today was a direct result of a think tank strategy that was actually strategized and developed the lines of attack. So we're not coincidental. We're not dealing with amateurs. Right? We're dealing with a whole strategy that laid out the theory and strategy of an aggressive pro-Israel posture. The Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs put $85 million for this campaign. So that's the strategy that we're facing. So we often think it's coincidental. Oh, there are just people there's a strategy, resources, and personnel that is brought to the strategy. Doesn't mean that they're Superman. I don't believe anybody is a Superman or superhuman, so on. These are human beings developing strategy and acting upon it, and we could undo and challenge every one of them, but we have to be very effective and systematic likewise. So just, I don't want to give you that's overwhelming. No, it is actually we could confront it and strategize. So Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs, PDS fight to move to Strategic Affairs Ministry. So literally, they consider the PDS is an existential threat for Israel, and the Students for Justice in Palestine, they consider it to be the most threatening movement in the history of the United States relative to Israel. And why? Because you need to understand, you have 230, almost 240 campuses of SJP. All are decentralized. There isn't a central, even though they talk about the SJP as a national. There is literally, you have to go every campus by campus, and the majority of the students are not Muslim, nor are Palestinians. It's just a crime, and in some campuses, the majority of the SJP members are progressive Jewish members. So that's a transformation. That is it. Now, I spoke to you about Stephen Emerson. For those who knew the history, Stephen Emerson tried to have a spy sent to Caire, and Caire was able to catch the spy, and the spy spilled the beans of Stephen Emerson in communication with Netanyahu. So we have the email. And Netanyahu is writing Stephen Emerson to see if he could find if SJP is funding Hamas. I know it's a level of craziness. SJP was basically on campus, they do a bake sale, they go to the local shawarma place and try to see if they could get a few shawarmas, and they go to what you call the best falafel place, can you donate 500 falafels to sell them on the plaza in order for them to do an event? And Netanyahu is writing to Stephen Emerson to ask Stephen Emerson to find if there is a link whether SJP is receiving support from Hamas. I think they were confused between Hamas and Hamas. So literally, this was how they consider BDS campaign and SJP effort, which has been successful in changing the narrative. U.S. campuses have shifted to a pro-Palestine perspective. In the state of California, when we had the graduate students vote on BDS won by 2/3 majority. That's across the state. In every campus. So we at least recognize what is taking place. Now they had a Las Vegas summit. Major funders of the program, which is the casino billionaire Sheldon Adelson, and Power Ranger billionaire Hatem Saban invite you to the weekend, you show up. Sheldon Adelson is a major funder for the Republican. Hatem Saban is a major funder for the Democrats. When it comes to Israel, they don't have what you call a difference of opinion, and they come together. The major funder of Democrats, the major funder of the Republican. The secret meeting at Sheldon Venetian Hotel marked the unveiling of a well-funded effort to oppose the BDS movement on campus. They called the meeting the Campus Coffee Summit. Right? So that's a summit to strategize. So whatever you're seeing today in college campuses, the attacks, the demonization, that's part of a strategy that begins much earlier with deep funding behind it. I want you to understand this for us to make sure how to count. Campus Pro-Israel Group monitored progressive Jewish students. So it's not only Palestinians or Muslims, JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, if not now. International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, all are subject to the same type of demonization and monitoring taking place. Right? So breaking the silence, this was an important article in the Intercept inside the Israeli rights campaign to silence an anti-occupation group. And I think if you have the time to watch the documentary from Al Jazeera that Professor Ahlam Muhtaseb mentioned, make sure to watch it. It's available on YouTube, and you could actually do just a study to understand the tactics. If you don't understand the tactics, you can't strategize on how to undo them. Right? You need to know what is being done in order to challenge it. Right? Now, side group Project Butterfly, May 2017. This is the project that unfolded with the posters that I showed you in the beginning. The FBI became aware of this when they were investigating Cambridge Analytica, or the use of the internet and so on. They ran and found that this group is actually working to try to target pro-Palestine activism on college campuses. They selected the targets, developed the summary, the goals, the action plan, identifying number of campuses and targets to pursue and go after. This is where actually the operation plan, including having what's called human intelligence. I believe that they actually had some people who were pretending to be students in my class, collecting as a human intelligence. Right? So again, this part strategy was funded with $2.5 million budget to actually on the operation. So there was a lot of money, but what positively I would say that we were able to push back and challenge this effort at various campuses. So it's very important to know of this, the budget, the resources. In some cases, side group operatives conducted on the ground covert human intelligence. Operations against their target, Israeli intelligence officials insisted that they do not spy on Americans. Don't believe that for a moment. We're still having a FOIA request from the university and those involved to see whether they actually cooperated, knowingly or unknowingly, with some of the individuals that were engaged in what's called the human intelligence. Right? The FBI is investigating to look at this network. So always, again, I know people meet with the FBI for other purposes, right? I want the FBI to do their work, right? Instead of sending crawlers and spies to our community to shake hands and say how they love our community and how they speak Arabic perfectly, I want them to go and investigate people who are targeting our community, people who are sending intelligence gathering on a regular basis. So there is this part. So university leadership is not neutral. All of the UC chancellors signed a statement of support for Israel, even after October 7th. Right? Suspension of controversial Palestine class at UC Berkeley. When we had, this is a decal class that the university suspended based on a letter that they received from Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs and a number of Israelis. So literally interfering on the campus. Letter to UC Berkeley Chancellor Durst regarding serious concern about vetting procedure for decal courses at UC Berkeley. Right? A foreign country writing to complain about a class organized by student with a faculty sponsor. That's the level of, right? Why a controversial Palestinian history class at Berkeley was canceled, then reinstated. We fought this effort. These are the organizations that signed the letter to the university. The university received the letter at around 6 a.m. in the morning. By 10 a.m., they canceled the class. I wish they had this much what you call proactive response when we asked for pay raises. Right? Or we were asked for to use a van for the students to take them across for a trip. 4 hours. And a class was canceled. The only time in the history of the UC Berkeley that a class was canceled was during the Cambodian War. So 1960. And even then, the university asked the academic senate for permission to cancel the class. So we are actually on a territory by ourselves in terms of the intervention by a foreign country. Now, Palestine, this was the class for 2016, Palestine, a Settler Colonial Analysis. So was the class that was being offered by a student who saw that the curriculum has no classes that is addressing this, and it wanted to be in ethnic studies. So he offered this class. UC Berkeley suspends course. Paul Hadway did not comply with policies and procedure that govern the normal academic review and approval of proposed course of the decal program for student-led courses, said Dan Maloff, the school assistant vice chancellor. Now, they attacked the student on the fact that he didn't follow procedure. Again, Dan Maloff is a PR person. Before that, he worked at Pizza Hut. He should stick to that field, right? So literally, it's a public relations statement throwing the student under the bus and accusing him of not following policy. Spin doctoring afterwards. UC Berkeley reinstated student course on Palestine. Immediately after the course was canceled, we got the academic senate, we got the faculty, including the faculty for academic freedom statewide, and we also called the American Professor Association to all write letters and so on. And the academic senate was actually enraged about it because university classes are the preview of faculty, not public relations officers, not the chancellor. The chancellor responsibility with his administration is to make sure that the lights are on, that the carpet is clean, that the chairs are good and the tables are good, and everything is functioning. They do not have the right to intervene in the curriculum. Right? So as a result of this, the university had to reinstate the course. Right? They tried to actually ask me to re-sign the paperwork. I said no. The academic senate approved the course with my signature before. Unless the academic senate tells me that my signature is not valid, then I would actually re-sign it. So I'm not going to sign the paper. So the signature from the course initially was the signature, right? So UC Berkeley State class in Palestine following outcry over suspension. The course was rename Palestine a settler colonial inquiry, right, instead of analysis. Right? And literally, I said, I'm not going to sign whatever you change. I'm not signing. That is not a substantive change for me to actually resign. It's you have to do whatever you want to do. Now we forced the dean to apologize to Paul because he did not do anything wrong. Right? I fully support and defend the principles and policies of our campus that protect the academic freedom of all of our members of the community, whether student, faculty, or staff visitors, as well as shared governance of our campus by administration and faculty. And then I await an apology. This is for Paul, and then the apology came. Dear Paul, I'm writing to offer an apology for the public misstatement made regarding your DCAT course submission in the campus announcement of the decision to suspend Ethnic Studies 198 course this fall. Pending further review, at that time, there was confusion. There was no confusion. If they were confused, that's their coffee at the town was cold. There was no confusion. They acted because they were called to act by Israeli and pro-Israeli forces coming from Israel, and they acted. So they had to actually issue an apology to Paul, from the dean who suspended the course. Jewish students to Harvard University alleged severe anti-Semitism on campus. So now we're dealing with the strategies of going after campuses, and this is part of using both. Most of these are charging that students are engaged in anti-Semitism because they're supporting Palestine. But the opponents saying free Palestine, even saying that it's the history of Palestine is more than October 7. That is seen as an anti-Semitic. So using this as a way, calling SJP as supporters of Hamas is a way to demonize it. So all these are strategies that are being pursued at this point. Pressure from donors. So billionaire hedge fund CEO Bill Ackman and several other business leaders are demanding Harvard University release the names of students whose organizations signed to a letter blaming solely Israel for the deadly attack. So there's massive pressure from big donors to literally shut down and close the pro-Palestine activism. So I want to conclude with the following: that you cannot separate Palestine from the Islamophobia industry. The Islamophobia industry is structured on Palestine, and you cannot escape, right? There's Muslims who believe that they would escape Palestine. If they keep Palestine outside, they might be able to enter. Even if you leave Palestine outside, Palestine will follow you inside. Because even when you leave it, they ask you to sign on a statement condemning what's happening in Palestine. And therefore you get dragged into Palestine thinking that you have this is what happened with a number of Shura councils that attempted to try to reach a statement, but the statement again got them to lose support from their community because they thought their relationship is sufficient for them to get quote a cover, but it didn't. It actually ended up being. So the lesson to learn is that Islamophobia and Palestine are structurally co-producers. So those who produce Islamophobia tend to demonize and push Palestine out. One. Second, now as pro-Palestine activists, you have to take account that not only we're facing the Zionist network, but also the Hindutva. People have come strongly in support of the Zionists. If you actually follow tweets, Facebook posts, Instagram, you're actually seeing a large presence of Hindutva activists demonizing and engaging in the demonization. And that's also, we see it in the California model ethnic studies, where we've got the Hindutva, the pro-Zionists, and also some of the right-wing Christian groups that are Christian Zionists to torpedo and derail the model ethnic studies because it included Palestine. Unfortunately, they gave what you call a crumb on including one unit on Islamophobia, that some people ate that crumb and they think they got a meal. They don't know that that crumb was on behalf of a big loaf. not many loaves of bread that was going to the ADL. Right? So the ADL right now is training on Islamophobia and also anti-Semitism, and also they put themselves as being trainers on anti-black racism. So for you to understand, you cannot teach on Islamophobia outside of the Muslim community. You need to insist that any training on Islamophobia has to come from legitimate Muslim organizations that have done the work on Islamophobia and continue to do the work on Islamophobia. I'm not posting about our center or our work, but CARE has been partner with us from the get-go and some other groups, so we need to make sure that this is the case and don't allow this to occur. Lastly, I want you to continue to report. In a study that the Othering and Belonging Institute on Islamophobia, 93% of Muslims who face Islamophobic incidents don't report it. And therefore, if a tree falls in the forest and it's not on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, it is really false. Report. Data is very, very important. Right? Now, I know that you saw the data from ADL, right? 1/3 of that data entered that every rally, pro-Palestine rally, was entered as an anti-Semitic incident. Almost 900 plus. If you go to their report, dig down, you'll find that close to 900 plus of these incidents were incidents of actually protests, pro-Palestine protests was entered as anti-Semitic. So what I want you to actually to report. I know CARE has a reporting mechanism. We have a reporting app. We need to report. We need the data in order to advocate. Data must and should drive policy, not all the time, but if you have enough data, you will be able to actually make the argument and continue to build on. So I don't want to keep you here till midnight, but inshallah, we're training for Sahur. Thank you for coming out. If you can continue to support the center, by all means. If you could do a monthly donation, even a $10 monthly donation for the center, by all means, a monthly donation can help us keep going. And this is, again, the effort is continuous. This year, our international conference is going to be in Sarajevo, in Bosnia. So it's, our annual conference was not going to be in Berkeley, it's in Sarajevo on May 24th, 25th, and 26th to try to look at ultranationalism that uses violence, because Bosnia is actually being used by the Islamophobic industry as the model of success. The genocide in Bosnia. It's not coincidental that Christchurch shooter who went into the two mosques was playing a Serb nationalist song, and his guns were emboldened with Serb nationalist statements. So we're going to Bosnia to again examine the Bosnian genocide, but in comparison to what is taking place in different places. So we'll put out this announcement for people. We already have about 65 papers that have been put forth by scholars in the field. And so far, our Islamophobia journal is literally the leading journal in the field. It's the only journal in the field. We have about 181 academic articles. We get about 10 to 12,000 academic downloads per month. Right? So literally, that's anyone that is engaged, and we have consulted with the UN. Just for the past 3 months, we consulted with New York activists that are working on policies in New York, people in Texas as well, in Florida. I've been reviewing all kinds of statements, policies, and so on relative to Islamophobia. So the impact is really there, and our footprint is very extensive, even though that it might not appear to be from what we call a distance perspective. Literally, you cannot do research and work on Islamophobia without checking with us and the work that we do, whether you do it here, in Canada, or any place in Europe. The network is very, very extensive in terms of scholarship. So, Jazakumullah khair for coming, and may Allah bless you and continue to extend this support.